Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. This one was actually a pretty long time in coming. In December of last year, I participated in Indie Summer, which is a bingo board type readathon all about indie books. And one of the spaces on that bingo board was to read a book inspired by non-Western mythology. I looked through my Kindle app and I found one called The Kishi, based on West African mythology. And I thought that was really cool. So I decided to read it. Loved it, wanted to talk about it in a video, and then realized I had no clue how to pronounce the author's last name. And I tried searching on some sites, but nothing was working, so I'm like, hey, I'll just email the author. And I did. He was thrilled by the idea that I was including his book in a video, and then one was like, hey, do you want to review the next one I'm writing? It's about African sky pirates. And I was like, yes? Is that even a question? So I am reviewing By Sea and Sky by Antoine Bandele, as he explained it to me. And the minute I heard African sky pirates, I was there. And it is African sky piratey. This is all about a woman named Zala and a man named Kareem in dual point of views. Zala is a pirate, not really a good one. She doesn't really kind of want to be one, but some things have gone on that she needs a lot of money for, especially to help her husband, Jelani. And they come across an airship, this fancy airship that this Saudi Arabia-inspired kingdom, the Vajai, at least I think that's how that's pronounced. I'm never quite sure how to go with like fantasy names because like you can't really look them all up. But that kingdom is very heavily based on the Middle Eastern countries, but now they have an airship. And they want a sea speaker to, well, it's a very long, complicated plot, but they are inherently at odds, Zala and Kareem, although they never actually, like, speak to each other. Although I am looking forward to the day that they do, because this is a trilogy, so I know it's coming. But they are inherently at odds with each other. Their goals in the story are exact opposites, and yet I was like low-key rooting for both sides. And I'm not quite sure how Antoine managed that, because Zala loves her husband and she's really, really slow at forming attachments to people. She has a few friends, but even that was like grudgingly so because she doesn't want all the connections. Please excuse the screaming of children in the background. I cannot get them to be quiet long enough to film. Anyway, I really appreciated the friendship she was making, even against her own will at times. We have an Aziza, which is a kind of fairy person who, well, I guess she's only half. And then we have Shomari, who is a Paka, which is basically, in my brain, kind of came across like a African Khajiit from Skyrim. Like, that's the best comparison I can make, but he's like the best fighter and is like inhumanly fantastic at all of like the hand-to-hand combat stuff. So I loved it. And also always sarcastic. It's great. But then there are some people on Kareem's side, Issa, his old friend, and like both sides are likable. And it's not fair. Usually in a book it's like, oh, these are very obviously the good guys and these are very obviously the bad guys, and it's very simple to see. But even then it's like, because these pirates aren't like we're technically pirates but we really have hearts of gold. No, like they're jerks and like they kill merchants and steal stuff. So like they're not like the best pirates. Like Zala, yeah, she's one of the good ones, but at no point are you like, oh yes, this is very clearly the side I am meant to connect with. Even though, you know, Zala is the one on the cover. But that made it so much harder when there were clashes and fights, which was really cool because it's like Seaboat versus Skyboat, and it was so good. And I eventually just kind of accepted that I was never going to be able to pick among my book children and just see how it happens. One of the things I really liked about the fighting sequences is they had weight. You didn't have a bunch of characters magically surviving completely intact through every time. There were consequences, and even if someone survived, there could be a body-altering injury that they permanently, you know, had a peg leg now or whatever. And I really appreciated that. It made the fights feel important. It made decisions feel important. Both Kareem and Zala make decisions that don't have exactly the outcomes they were looking for, and everything felt weighty and important and like it was leading to something. At no point was anything like, oh, we're going to try this thing, but JK, everything's back to normal. Everything mattered, and I really appreciated that. If I had any, not really a gripe, but if I had any kind of, I don't know how well we thought that one through, it would be the fact that the only openly queer characters, at least in this book, were basically mean brutes. That's the only thing I really had a problem with. And to Antoine's credit, you can already see maybe the beginnings of a redemption arc, or like they were more humanized over the course of the story. But at the beginning, Mantu and Duma were kind of like the brutes bullying Zala around and that kind of thing. And I was like, really? That's your only same-sex relationship in the story, the mean guys? There might be other queer characters. I'm not exactly sure. You don't see too much. But thankfully, those two do get some character development as things go on. And by the end of the story, they're still not totally good guys, necessarily. I mean, one of them kind of is, without giving too much away. But for the most part, I would love to see much more development in that, and maybe some other queer characters that don't start out being antagonists. But beyond that, I really appreciated this. There is a lot of references to different things that were also in the book The Kishi. It's one that shared universe called Esawan, I believe is the name of the land. And again, fantasy names, a little bit difficult, but and I think that's kind of what the author is working towards, is a universe in which all the books take place, even if they don't all overlap with each other. Like, I remember in one part of this book, they're like, oh yes, this person is Yaseti, and I was like, I know that one, because that one was a big factor in the other book. And I really liked that you don't have to have read the Kishi to understand this one. It's a totally separate story with totally, it does all the work to world build in the book, so you don't have to look anything else up. And thankfully, the world building was kind of nice, because so much of the story happens on the open ocean that you don't have to worry about the world building too much. You need to know that these countries exist, and these ones are kind of at war with these ones, and these ones are known for, being archers. So if one of the Yaseti got a bow on you, you're not gonna have a good time. But it was very nice, integrated world building. It's not a giant block of text that you have to memorize. It's as characters meet other characters, oh, that's a Yaseti bow, or that's those pakas, and it's kind of just accepted, and they give it to you piece by piece as characters move through the world or talk to other characters, as opposed to, giant info dumps. And I really appreciate that. And that's what Antoine did in the last book that I read too. It's very well done world building. So if you struggle with that, I would highly suggest this one. There's also, as the blurb tells me, some emphasis on the West Indies, and I do not know that culture well enough to be able to spot out what parts of this book come from that, if it's just the setting or something more. But I appreciated that it's all, well, technically yes, all a cast of color. I think there's depending on what you consider an albino woman to be, you can decide. But regardless, I loved all of the culture, and the one thing I liked about this is that it shows the culture in a loving way, because I have read some other African-inspired books that are very barbaric and horrible in nature, and it's are you trying to say what you're saying about the continent, or is that incidental? But here it's no, it's awesome, it's lovely, look at all these their customs and the clothing and all of that. It was a lot more loving of a representation than some other books, Black Leopard, Red Wolf. But anyway, I highly suggest this one. I was a big fan. It was nice and action-packed for those looking for that. There are a lot of fantasy elements, and it's not too like fantasy, like neither of our protagonists are mystics or pathers. Those are kind of different names for them. And also here, magics also have a lot of nice, hefty consequences, because I love magic that has consequences, because one of my biggest pet peeves in fantasy is when the magic can just be thrown around a lot to solve all of your problems. But here it's like, oh, you want to use that god's glass to magnify your gifts? Hope you don't get stone skin. Like, it's awesome. So in general, 5 stars. Very, very big fan of this book. And Antoine, if you want to send me the sequel when it comes out, I would not say no. So this one, I believe, comes out June 19th, if I remember correctly, because I actually got an ARC read and reviewed before publication day. That doesn't happen a lot anymore. So I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy I read this. You should too. If you are an indie author and you would like a review like this one, please send me an email. I will have that down in the description below. I will also have my review policy down there. Please give that a read through. It answers a lot of questions and saves us a lot of time. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.